and Diane have not been given any instruction yet as to what is about to happen. So they don't know what the format is. So I'm going to reveal your instructions now so everyone can hear it. In a moment, I'm going to literally go around the world asking you to just introduce yourself. I'm sure everyone knows who you all are anyway, but what I would like you to do is to deliver, okay, all right, I'm just warning you here, deliver a 90-second manifesto, all right, of your perspective on customer experience today. Where are we today and where do we need to go to? Okay, that's the only instruction, but 90 seconds. So I am going to time you, all right? And if you go over 90 seconds, Diane Majors, I will stop you, all right? Now, I don't want this to feel as though I'm picking on Diane, all right? But I know Diane. So 90 seconds is all you're going to have to deliver your position on CX in the world today. Everyone okay with that? Yeah, good. Okay, I got a big thumbs up from Dennis. Eytan's just got this strange expression on his face, so I'm slightly worried what he's going to say, and Olga's always smiling, so there's no issue with that. But it's very important as well that the audience knows that we'd quite like this to be interactive as well. So please do share your thoughts on what you think. You know, when you hear what everyone says, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have a completely different perspective? Please share your thoughts and also your questions, because I'll be posing your questions to the panel as we go through. So, everyone comfortable? Good.
Maybe.
Maybe. Dennis is saying, okay, so that's all right. Now, to kick us off, I'm going to give my perspective. Is that all right? Just because I think if I'm expecting all of you guys to, and by the way, I only made.
We get to time you.
Well, I only made up the 90-second thing just now. So yes, Olga, you can time me. All right, Olga, you're in charge of timing. So I haven't thought about this. I haven't prepared anything or planned anything. I'm just going to go. All right. So are you ready with the timer, Olga? Let's go.
Okay.
So, Ian Golding, Global Customer Experience Specialist, as I like to call myself, incredibly passionate and focused about the evolution of customer experience as a profession, as I have been since I first realized that that's what this was in 2011. I've been doing it for longer than that, but it was only in 2011 when people made me realize that what I do is a profession. I've been talking for quite some time now that customer experience is advancing, and it has advanced very well over the last 12 years, but very well from the perspective of putting customer experience into the language of business. Most organizations around the world talk about it, and they talk about it a lot. And I think we mustn't underestimate how important that is. I think it's great that it is part of the language of both public and private sector. However, which is a word that I use a lot, whilst customer experience is part of the language, have we globally, as a customer experience profession, embedded customer experience into organizations to enable it to deliver measurable change? Have we, as a profession, transformed legacy organizations from being sales-led, product-led, to being customer-led? So if I'm going to be remarkably provocative, I believe that the majority of customer-centric organizations today were created that way. Regrettably, the overwhelming majority of legacy organizations who listened to the rhetoric of CX and started to do something with it, the majority have failed to become customer-centric. They might still be working towards that aspiration, but they haven't got there yet. And I think as a result, you could argue that the profession is not going fast enough, or you could argue that the world hasn't understood customer experience well enough to enable the change to happen. So I think that there is a very, very long way to go before, as a discipline, we can say we are having the effect, the impact we want to have. So I don't know how long that was, Olga. It felt longer than 90 seconds, but
roughly
that is my manifesto. So for now, you can agree or disagree with me if you're listening to this, please do. But I would now like to go, let's balance this up, boy, girl, boy, girl. So Olga, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I'm Olga Potaptseva. I'm a global customer experience professional, and my mission is to equip every organization with a customer-informed operating model. It's a very big mission, and this is what I do in my day-to-day job. I work with organizations to make CX into a business discipline alongside all the other disciplines. And I believe this is the only way for CX to become a valued and valued business contributor. I admire CX professionals for being resilient and determined, and for the fact that they keep pushing despite resistance. I think we've got quite far in terms of CX tools usage, such as CX strategy creation, journey mapping, and others. Where we do have a way to go still is translating our tools into business projects, proving the ROI of those projects, and demonstrating to the business that CX is an integral part of operations, not some siloed department somewhere. I believe that AI can advance or harm our impact. We need to embrace it, and we need to help businesses do it the right customer-centric way and ensure it delivers value. Otherwise, there is a risk.
It's the timer.
Okay. Okay.
I'm going to stop.
I have one more thing to say.
Go on, one more. I'll let you do one more thing.
Total experience. So moving beyond customer experience and progressing towards employees and societies as a whole.
Interesting. Okay.
That's my 95-second download.
Thank you, Olga. I'll let you off the additional 5 seconds.
Thank
Dennis and Eytan, I'm not going to be as nice to you. Let's go from, and by the way, I'm in the UK, so I said we are, totally global. Olga is in Georgia, not in the US, but Georgia, the country. Dennis, where are you? And then please deliver your manifesto.
Thank you, Ian. I'm Dennis Wakabayashi in Dallas, Texas. My personal mission and my role in the CX community is really to emancipate, celebrate, and educate through the voices of CX around the world. I've spent the last year traveling around the world, talking to frontline agents and hearing their stories, because there's an untold conversation of the world's haves reaching out to the world's have-nots to demand satisfaction. And that illustrates just one aspect of what I believe is another aspect of our industry, which is when I look around the world, I see that a key factor in the transformation of organizations is people feeling safe. And whether it's your frontline worker, your middle management, and often underrepresented and unspoken for is the safety of the CEO. And in our current global economic business environment, political environments, CEOs often are not feeling the safety that or control that they once had in the world. And so in 2024, I would encourage us all to also think about the mental health and the safety and the support of the CEOs who are brave enough to make transformation happen.
Really interesting. I did not expect one of the panel to be on the side of the CEO, but that's why this is unfiltered. and provocative. You may agree with Dennis, you may disagree. It's entirely up to you. Make sure that you share your comments with us. Brilliant. Thank you, Dennis. Let's go from now. Dennis is in Texas, and so is Diane. So let's stick in Texas and go to Diane. I don't know how far away you are as the crow flies, but let's go to you, Diane.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you, Eytan. That was wonderful. Dennis, I love that you brought the human into it because that's what I often talk about. I'm Diane Majors. I'm a human experience management professional. And that's part of my manifesto is the fact that we now, with all the automation and technology, have a lot of opportunity to serve those humans in a different way, to your point, Dennis. So I loved your point. The one thing I will say is I will echo the sentiment that both Ian and Olga had around the operating system. If we don't have an experienced operating system, meaning this is embedded in everything an organization does, from how they develop products, how they deliver products, how they serve their customers, how they build financial models, how they make decisions, it will not get integrated and we will not be successful. That struggle comes from leadership not understanding how it can shift the organization, the way it works. It can be more agile, it can be more collaborative, all the things they're looking for. So it's up to us to elevate this discussion, not just pushing them to talk about it more, but they need to understand how it can get operationalized. They understand the ROI, they need to understand how to operationalize experience as a way to build that ROI. They're responsible for it, as well as the leaders that report to them, and eventually every single person. So we have to make it real. It has become the voice of customer, do some projects, NPS. We need to move away from that to making it an operational discipline inside the organization, not alongside, inside. So that's my manifesto today, and hopefully you'll take away a few things today on how that needs to happen.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Di. Brilliant. And again, if you didn't know, Diane used to be the CEO of the CXPA, so she has been responsible for CX Day in the past, but Diane is an amazing CX professional in her own right. So it's brilliant to have these different perspectives. But last but not least, let's go to Eytan. Now, Eytan, you could be in a variety of places, but tell us where you are.
So I'm spending my time between, first of all, nice to meet you, Eytan Hattem. I'm a global customer experience professional. I am splitting my time between Paris and Tel Aviv, so it depends when. I think that customer experience has evolved in terms of awareness. People know today what CX is. You know, they hear a lot about it, and it's something familiar. I think customer experience would probably evolve to be more a total experience approach, where you're trying to improve the stakeholder experience and not just focus on customers, but employees, partners, suppliers, investors, and everything around that. I also think, and I agree that AI, with Olga and also what Diane said, that AI is going to play a significant role in the technological part and can bring many benefits. I still think that the human challenge is the involvement of management in customer experience projects. So I'm doing many CX implementation projects, and I see that this is one of the key hurdles, is the management. The CEO isn't connected enough to CX, and that's a lot, because I don't think we make enough the connection between the CX matrix and the business objectives. And this is the language that the CEO and senior management speaks, and it has to be translated in that way. And I see our job as CX professional as translators of customer experience matrix into business outcomes. 90 seconds.
Amazing. Very good. Thank you, Eytan. And thank you to all of you. We're getting a lot of reaction from the audience. So again, thank you everyone for interacting with us. That's exactly what we want. But I'm now going to up the ante on provocation here, because there are many things I want to ask all of you. But the first thing I want to ask is the provocative question that is the segue from what Eytan just said, but it connects to what the rest of you said as well. In many cases, leadership teams still don't get it, okay, for want of a better description. But for the CX profession, we've been saying that for 12 years, okay? That's not new. So the question I want to ask you is the fact that leaders don't get it our fault or their fault? Okay, now, I don't want to blame anyone here, but, you know, do we need to look at ourselves and say, actually, it's the CX professional that just isn't doing an effective enough job to enable them to, because we get it. So if we get it, what are we doing wrong that means that leaders aren't getting it? So is it that leaders don't get it? Is it that they don't want to get it? Is it that they would rather we just disappear into a hole somewhere? So that's the question. Whose fault is it? Is it down to us or is it down to leadership? Anyone feel strongly enough to have a go at that first? Go on, Dennis.
I have an opinion, unpopular opinion. You want to be unfiltered? You want to give it to people straight? Here's my opinion. I don't think it's the fault of the CXers. I don't think it's the fault of the management. I think our biggest challenge with regard to the context of what you said is that everyone in the organization works in some way towards the benefit of the customer. But the CEO works for the benefit of Wall Street and stakeholders who don't care about the customer whatsoever. And because the market demands efficiency and profitability at the expense of the customers, unless you have a bold organization, it's almost impossible to plant and reap the benefits of CX within any organization. That's just my unpopular opinion.
Really? Well, you say it's unpopular. It might not be unpopular, Dennis. Let's see what other people think. Eytan, I'll come to you and then I'll come to you, Olga.
I think that the implementation of customer experience model, like Dan said, you put the operating model in place, you know, and Olga also, I know, working a lot around that. This is complicated, you know, this isn't easy to put it in place. So I think that, you know, many organizations struggle when they get to execution. So you can speak about customer experience and the theory sounds great, and everyone can agree on the objective and how we should do it. But then when you actually come to do it, then that's a lot of work and it requires organizational changes, budget allocation, people in different positions, changing the way you think, the way you process, because what CX is, it's a tool for decision making. You know, you're supposed to take decision using this type of methodology, but putting it in place and changing your whole organization to think and work in that way, that's a lot of work and it's not easy. So people are just afraid to step into it. And I remember, Ian, you said, you know, you said CX is a leap of faith, right? You said it. And when you said it, I was afraid when you said it, because I thought, how can management, you know, follow such a guideline, you know, leap of faith? This isn't something rational people do.
I'm going to come back to that in a second. And Diane, just to prepare you, I'm probably going to pose this to you, okay? But Olga, what's your thoughts on what you've heard from Dennis and Eytan?
I'd like to build on what Dennis said initially about CEO safety. If you are a CEO, you are sort of expected to know it all. You are not a specialist in finance, marketing, operations, customer experience, and all those areas, yet they come to you and they ask for decisions. And an effective conversation can only be had when we listen. I think CX professionals are trying to talk too much and not listen to CEOs. And if we understood their perspectives better, we would be able to suggest solutions to their problems. And this is how we can convince them that CX has a place. I spoke to an organization today where they have a department of 15 CX professionals. Clearly, a CEO has decided to pay their salaries, yet they're struggling. And the reason they're struggling is that they're not making their voices heard, they're not contributing in the right way. So I'm definitely not blaming people, but I do advise listening more and trying to solve business problems.
Olga, I think that is a brilliant point. And I agree with you. I think to a degree, I have been guilty of just steaming in and saying, this is what you need to do, and haven't necessarily understood their perspective enough. I think that is it sounds so obvious when you say it, but I think that is a brilliant learning. Dennis, for what it's worth, by the way, I agree with you. I've said for a long time now that I think that where we have failed as a profession is to influence shareholders and financial markets. You know, I still think that shareholders and financial markets are looking for a short-term financial return. They don't understand that this is a long-term strategy. So I don't think your opinion is an unpopular one at all. I want to come back to what Eytan said about leap of faith. All right, because I've heard that expression many times. This is a leap of faith. But what I struggle with, and Di, I'd love to know what you think on this, is why is it a leap of faith? And the reason why I say that is, I don't think I've spoken to you since I watched this, but I was in Istanbul a couple of weeks ago, and on the plane, I watched the Bezos movie. Now, I didn't even know there was a Bezos movie, and I've spoken to a lot of people who didn't know there was a Bezos movie. Now, it's not a documentary, it's a biopic about the start of Amazon. Now, just as a disclaimer here, the acting, in my opinion, is awful. Okay, so if you want to watch it, don't watch it for its acting value. But as a customer experience story, it's fascinating because it sort of reinforces why what we do is so important. And what I found fascinating about it as a reminder is just how courageous Jeff Bezos was. Now, whether or not he still is, I don't know, but just how courageous he was in doing what he did. It was almost like a blind, just militant commitment to doing what he thought was the right thing. And he was belittled and patronized by his competitors. The CEO of Barnes & Noble was just unbelievable in his disparagement of what Jeff Bezos was trying to do. The financial markets thought he was completely mad. But he knew that if you do the right thing for the customer in the long term, the reward will come. He was offered $1 million by Barnes & Noble to go away and just leave it alone. And he said no, because he knew that in the long term, if you do the right thing for the customer, you will get the reward. Now, he was right. So when people see what Jeff Bezos did, why is that still a leap of faith? Is it because they haven't got the patience to wait as long as Jeff Bezos did? What's your view, Di? And by the way, you don't have to like Jeff Bezos, by the way.
As the Amazon truck pulls up to my front yard, literally on cue, like on cue. Not that I ordered anything, of course, but I think we have to remember that the business lens wins a lot. It wins a lot more than the experience lens. And our role is to continually be with those leaders, talking about the fact that the reason that you have a job or a company in the first place is because you have customers. And people seem to forget that. It's like shareholder value. You're not going to get that if customers aren't buying your product, buying your services, because that's where your revenue is coming from. So who else is going to manage it? You can't decision your way out of that. You also can't decision your way out of the fact that employees are the biggest cost in your organization. So your profitability is dependent on the experience of these two groups, period. If you're keeping the employees engaged and talented, upskilled, they're working differently, they want to work differently. You think about 20-year-olds today, they want to work differently. That's the future. That's the way things are going. But we have leadership, I think, and I think a lot of people in the organization have blinders on when it comes to this. If you simply ask them, the last time you made a decision to buy a product or service from a company, did you buy it because it was a bad experience? Well, of course not. Or if you did, you're not going back. Every experience we have doesn't have to be long-term. Every single experience somebody has can drive that revenue or benefit. And so every decision everybody makes every day is having an impact on whether the customer is going to come back, buy that product, tell other people or not. And that's your business impact. So I think we miss the mark when we talk about, like I said, it's operationalizing all of that and making sure that becomes part of what you do. But it's also about reminding leaders, this is why you're here. This is who pays your paycheck, by the way, these customers and these employees.
I love the terminology operationalizing customer experience. I think, in my opinion, over the last 12 years, we've spent too much time theorizing. And to a degree, I think some still do spend too much time theorizing and not enough time really showing organizations how to embed it. And if I sort of leverage this, Olga, when you shared your manifesto, you talked about the need for total experience, and Eytan agreed with you that we need to focus on the total experience. Now, my worry is, and again, I'm being intentionally provocative, if we've got the world to recognize that CX is important, okay, we haven't yet got to the point where they're doing it, but it's important. Should we even consider starting to think of something that sounds even harder than that when they still haven't got their heads around customer experience? What's your thoughts on that?
I'd like to rewind back to start answering your question and talk about CX as a long-term game.
Yes.
I disagree with that, if I may. I think CX has to deliver benefits today, this quarter, this financial year. Otherwise, we're going into the old school, waterfall project model. We're saying, well, sometime in future, in 10 years, we're all going to be happy. And now we're going to work towards that no matter what. The world changes. We have global pandemics. We have new technology. We have new customers emerging. We can't just count on 10 years returns. So whilst we are absolutely right to have that goal in mind, we need to deliver something tangible every reporting period, if you like. And that kind of leads me to answer your question. Are we right to target total experience? Absolutely. Can we do small things today? Yes, we can. I encourage you to look into the case study of Dubai Police, who won 5 gold awards in the latest International CX Awards for customer-centric culture. Would you expect a police organization to have a customer-centric culture? And who is the customer? And the customer is the society, amongst other groups. So yes, at every organization, you have internal, external shareholders and stakeholders that you can be working to improve experience for.
Yeah, I agree. And interestingly, I don't know if I shared with you, Olga, that I presented an award to the Dubai Public Prosecution Service. And I've never laughed when I've presented an award before, but I had to laugh. And in fact, everyone in the audience laughed because they said, my question to you was, you're the Public Prosecution Service. Why customer experience? And this lady, very smart, petite lady, said with a deadpan, even people that do things wrong deserve to have an experience that is acceptable. But, again, it's fascinating when you hear things like that, but that's mindset, that's culture, surely. But if I come to you, Dennis, that point about short-term or long-term, what do you think about that? Because is the reality of the Jeff Bezos story just, it isn't going to happen. I'm not going to wait 20 years to turn a profit. It's just ridiculous. I know Olga didn't use those words, but, it's just far too long. But what's your view on that?
Couple of things. Number one, whether it's the car, the iPhone, or Amazon, I'm not convinced it's necessarily entirely the person who is at the helm. There are factors or transformations that happen in our world that are just caused by momentum that forces beyond all of our control. So maybe that Amazon was going to happen anyway. But what I will say is at Fidelity, the head of transformation at Fidelity is a gentleman named Deba Saho. I asked him, he's had a long run of transformation. How does he maintain true transformation? Because what we've discussed here today is it's nearly impossible. Very few can do it. I said, what's his secret? And he said the same thing Olga said, which is, put this way, in transformation, it's about going from point A to point B. And the challenge is people can deal with point B because it's in the future, it's undefined, and it's not yet happened. But the important thing is transformation is those who focus on point A tend to get to point B. People who focus on point B tend not to have transformation. And I think that's right. You have to be able to isolate the traction that you can get, no matter how small it is within an organization, and you have to propagate or scale that performance or success outwardly, both in terms of recognizing the people who do it, as well as reporting the profits or the benefits to the organization. Point A.
Very interesting. And it's, I suppose, to address point A, you need to recognize that that transformation is necessary in the first place, which again, I think is not always the case, actually. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, totally agree with it. I mean, yes, I agree with it.
So someone has asked a question in that's watching, and I think it's quite a nice follow-on to what we're discussing. And Eytan, I'm going to pick on you to respond to this. And interestingly, I chose today to carry on doing what I normally do. So, you know, today is CX day, but it's a normal day. So I was delivering a workshop today for a variety of people. And someone said to me, you know, Ian, you pick on certain companies as examples of not very customer centric. Okay, I won't say which companies I pick on, but those that have heard me speak know the companies I pick on. And the question was, you pick on them, but they're still there. They still exist. They still make money. People still go to them. So doesn't that just prove that it doesn't matter whether you're customer centric or not? So it's a big question, Eytan, but you know, how do those organizations that they almost flaunt their lack of customer centricity, you know, that it's almost like they really just don't care. How do they still survive?
I think it's a matter of choice, and second, it's a matter of expectations. So when you say that they deliver bad experience, it's compared to something, right? It's not just out there, it's not objective, it's something that compares to something else. So if you're in a sector where the level of service or expectation is low, then the customer experience could be bad, but comparing to the alternative, maybe it isn't as bad as you think it is. So I think this is one point. And secondly, you know, this whole transformation of customer centricity and the importance of the customer and having the customer-centric culture, as let's say as a profession that has a name with the CXP organization, we shouldn't forget that it doesn't exist so many years. I mean, we were always, maybe in the past, we're doing CX without calling it this way, but really putting the way today that we approach CX, the methodologies, the certification, how many CCXPs are around the world. I mean, if you look at it, it's a pretty young area comparing to other practices that exist, at least in the way that we have formed it today. And I also have a comment regarding what was said earlier. I think there's a problem also of ownership. You know, we're saying that, see, who's owning customer experience? Who's the owner? So this is one of the big issues also. When you have a CX professionals, people think he's doing CX and like we are doing something else. And but the whole organization is doing customer experience. What does it really mean doing customer experience? I mean, everyone's supposed to do it as part of their customer centricity or customer centric culture. So I think maybe this profession at some point of time should fade. I mean, instead of having someone responsible for CX, just everyone is CX, you know, this is the ultimate goal for me.
So let's stick on this area. If I advance what you're saying to come back to the point you made about execution, so organizations are struggling to execute.
Yeah.
Is that because there is just a lack of capability, or is it the lack of ownership, or is it just fundamentally a lack of cohesion to make it happen?
I think it's all of the above, because when you think of it, you come to execution. Now I have a list of 10 things I need to execute. I need people, I need budget, I need management attention, and these projects are not CX in there, you know.
Okay.
What is the CX project? You know, what does it mean? I need to implement a customer portal. I need to replace an information system. These are projects, you know, that the organization does, whether there is a CX professional, whether there isn't a CX professional. The CX methodology is just focusing on the prioritization of the things that will matter the most to customer experience and to achieving the business goal, both of them. I think this is the key here.
Interesting. And someone has again asked a question that I think takes this a step further. As you all know, I spend a lot of time sharing knowledge on the subject, as do all of you. And Jerry Angrave, who is a very good friend of mine, and I'm sure all of you as well, has asked the question about how do we increase education on this subject, but not for those who are already in leadership positions, but for the next generation of leader. You know, is part of the problem that we're trying to influence leadership teams who haven't been taught about customer experience at business school. You know, when they did an economics degree, customer experience wasn't mentioned. It just wasn't part of the fabric of what we were taught. It is new, to your point, Eytan. So is there more that we need to do as a profession to integrate CX learning for the next generation? Di, what's your thought?
Yes, yes, but I think it's not theory. Anybody who knows me knows I'm a big proponent of the learn, try, apply. You have to educate people, you have to engage them, you have to empower them, you have to enable them with the tools and resources to actually do the work. So it's great to have concepts, but people are going to go back to, as we all humans do, back to our daily habits, what we typically do. Great to know that, I'll be thinking about it, but I'm not going to change the way I develop this product or build this interaction or build the data that I need in order to get to the real root cause of the problem or monitor the customer. So I think we have to be extremely specific and prescriptive with how the organization needs to work differently and hold people accountable. All the things you're talking about are educating. You can do all of that you want. And yes, we need to, but if you don't hold people accountable to doing things differently, it's not going to change the way you work.
Yeah, I completely agree. And not that there's any statistics behind what I'm about to say, but wherever I travel in the world, the lack of accountability is consistently claimed to be the primary issue. You know, no one takes accountability. We don't know who's accountable for customer experience. I want to move the conversation slightly, because if you can believe it, guys, we're 2/3 through already. It's amazing how quickly this goes. One of the challenges that Eytan raised, I think it was Eytan raised, or one of you raised, was that this isn't easy. Okay, changing the nature of the way an organization works is not easy. It takes a huge amount of courage to say, do you know what, let's revisit our operating model and let's actually change the way we do business. It takes a lot of kahunas to actually make that decision, okay, to do that. But what we have to recognize is that over time, legacy businesses have hugely overcomplicated themselves. And I believe that one of the greatest barriers to transformation is that organizations are so overly complex that trying to undo all of that is the problem. It's just too difficult to undo it. But if you take that context and then go back to what you said, Olga, about delivering change now, don't wait for 10 years. I agree with you to a point, because I think someone said to me a couple of weeks ago that what we're looking for is perfection, but perfection takes too long. So should we stop worrying about perfection and redesigning the operating model in one go and start thinking about a more agile approach to driving change bit by bit on a more regular basis? I use the word agile intentionally because there's a lot of love for Olga Potaptseva and her focus on agile.
You'd like me to take that?
Yes, please.
So what I recommend doing is looking at your circles of control and circles of influence. What can you do and what can you influence, and what can't you do anything about? If you can't do anything about it, stop worrying about it. That takes a whole load off your shoulders to start with. Then think about the things you can control. As a CX team, you can control how functional requirements are being written for IT systems. You have the knowledge and the skill to show IT professionals how to write requirements differently. So do that. Can you influence your leadership to take more customer-centric decisions? Yes, you can. So think about a mentorship or communication program beyond a single workshop or a workshop every 2 years. What are the right levers to influence what you can influence? And I think then you have a chance to transform an operating model in a transformative, not revolutionary way, because revolutions never work.
That's a very good point. And I always think when we do things like this, there are tweetable quotes. So customer experience is about transformation, not revolution. I think that is definitely a tweetable, although we can't call it that anymore, can we? An Xable quote. One of the things you mentioned, Olga, in that is the CX team. And some of the people who are listening to us are talking about accountability, where the CX team sits, who's responsible, and so on and so forth. Now, this is an age-old question. Where does a CX team sit in an organization? But in 2023, moving quite quickly into 2024, we've already heard that actually this shouldn't necessarily be about the CX team. It should be about injecting CX competency across the organization. But in all of your perspectives, thinking about where we are today, where should CX professionals in an ideal world sit in the organization? How can they, using Olga's references to influence, where should they be sitting to have the greatest impact on enabling that influence to make a difference? Dennis, what's your thought on that?
I would say CX can live anywhere, but there is a root cause of dysfunction in CX teams and alignment. And one of the things that you can do to have a quick win, establish greater diplomacy within your organization, is have the conversation about incentives and their alignment. If you have two teams, two people in different silos, and you can, what I like to do is an incentive map when I'm working with an organization. I take the org chart, I take the players, I put a little note of here are the incentives. And where the incentives align, you can be strong, but when they're misaligned, there's this step of escalating to the next level of management to either realign the incentives or redefine incentives so that the teams are allowed to work collaboratively towards the progress of the objectives of the initiatives at hand. And so by aligning the incentives, you get the quick win that helps you go from point A to point B. And that can be done in smaller teams, bigger teams, or anywhere in the organization.
Interesting. I may come back to that point on incentives. Eytan, having heard that, and obviously you work a lot with the practitioner, where do you think that the professional who's defining the methodology, the approach, where should they sit?
I think that they should be part of a chief customer officer organization. And I'm saying that because if you want to echo the methodology and have an influence, you have to be well positioned in the organization. If the CX professional is somewhere down the stream and 5 levels above, reporting management levels are piling on the CX professional, then the impact doesn't really, doesn't get to the management, and will usually also not, I think, impact the organization. So I think that the CX profession needs to be in the management committee as a chief customer officer that has a CX team that is responsible to echo the methodology. This is what I think.
Interesting. Now, Diane, I'm going to come straight to you because you've been in senior practitioner roles. Were you actually called a chief customer officer? I can't remember. No,
Not back then. That
it didn't really exist, did it? But having been at that senior, most senior level as a CX professional, do you agree with Eytan?
Yes, but in a different way. I think both of those situations, I was in more of an enterprise transformation team. And so I find a lot of organizations today, because if you think about it, it really depends on where the seat of power is in that organization. I've seen people report into the sales team. But what I'm finding now more and more is that these organizations of experienced professionals are being put sometimes even in the enablement teams, meaning where the PMO sits and things. I have one that's designed, they're putting the CXO under the COO, kind of sitting beside but under, because that's where things get embedded into the organization, how they change their model. So it's important, and digital has been the same way. Digital experience now has become the top of the heap as far as conversation. So there's a lot of organizations, leaders of digital experience that are looking for that talent and the resource that a CXO has. So I think we still have the question of what is the right place to enable the organization in the right way. Yeah. I don't think the org chart makes a lot of difference. I think it's that where are you going to influence and how are you going to influence, and that could determine where you go.
And I suppose the reality is, if we're having this unfiltered conversation, there is no right answer to any of this because every organization is completely different. And I think that's what makes our discipline slightly unusual. An accountant follows a set of rules. There are no rules really when it comes to the customer experience profession. There is our ability to interpret the scenario that we're in, and then our ability to apply the right tools and techniques to most effectively influence that scenario. So I think a key word coming out of all of this conversation is influence, actually, that our profession is an influencing one. And I think Dennis also used the word diplomacy, which I think is equally as important. Now, we've got 9 minutes left, and there are 2 things I want to discuss with all of you, because it would be remiss of me in an unfiltered conversation to do this. Over the last 12 years and more, we have had varying conversations of varying levels of angst around customer experience and measurement. Now, measurement hasn't come up in the conversation yet today, but I'm going to leverage what Dennis was saying about incentives, because very often organizations are incentivizing their people to improve the customer experience, very often using NPS as the way of driving that incentive. Now, as we know, I say as we know, in my opinion, organizations are still, to this day, measuring the customer experience incredibly badly. NPS is a key driver of that. Far too many are jumping to entirely the wrong conclusion. But what's worse than that is that the metric that they are using incorrectly is the metric they're using also to incentivize. If that's going to change, because I think Dennis did mention actually in his manifesto that needs, or one of you mentioned it needs to change. How on earth can our profession influence that changing? Because every CX professional that I meet will agree with me to some degree, but no one is prepared to actually change it, or are they? So that is my sort of question to you all. Who fancies having a stab at that first?
I can do.
They all went quiet then. Did you see? No one wants to answer that question. Go on,
Oh,
Olga.
no.
You've got the courage to go first.
Sure. It's all about courage in our job, isn't it? NPS can be the right thing to measure if your business is driven by recommendations, and you can confidently say that recommendations actually drive people to come to you. Can you connect that? So that's the first question. So that leads me to the point that we need to have a balanced measurement system. So if you see an uplift in recommendations, do you also see an uplift in sales? If your business is not driven by recommendations, and I can give you an example, I've been asked, would you recommend this hospital? Yeah, sure, go break your leg. It's not a question to ask after you visit an accident in emergency department. So perhaps a better, more suitable, more customer-centric measure would have been more appropriate to measure the customer sentiment.
Yes.
But then also that needs to be connected to your voice of the process. So are your processes effective and efficient? Are you delivering the experience at the right cost? Your voice of the business, are you making money? And your voice of the employee, is your potentially great customer experience as a result of heroic efforts, and you may be seeing burnout and stress levels.
Absolutely.
And as long as you can connect those four voices, you would have a truthful reflection of your customer experience delivery.
Very interesting. Diane, I'll come to you. Your thoughts. I know you've got a lot to say about this, but as simply as you can.
Yeah, I'm only going to say part of it. I think that the outcome metrics, the things that we look at, like Net Promoter, effort score, some things that are longer term, they're not immediate. It takes a while for perception to change, are important for certain reasons, as Olga said, depending on your situation. I've been focused more on the measures. So back to Dennis's point of the measures that I have of somebody who's doing their job, if they can influence that measure and it is a measure of the customer or employee behavior, for example, number of people I drive to the website or number of people that we help through self-serving. If I can impact that and I'm incented to do that, and I can see the difference and I can measure that, I can count that, I can observe it. Yes. That's where the business value gets attached to. So I think the perception metrics are fine, but you have to really think about the different ways you're looking at it. I'm looking at it from an operational, financial standpoint, behavioral perception. You got to look at those measures differently. And to Olga's point, I would say that listening to those voices help you get to that pyramid.
Indeed. And I completely agree, actually. The voice of the business, it is a voice that I only started to articulate about 3 years ago. We have got to demonstrate the relationship between what we're doing to improve the customer experience and the impact it has on strategic business metrics, the voice of the business. If we can't do that, we're failing. Dennis.
I just want to jump in on that exactly just to chime in. So I have children now who are graduating from college. They're going to go into this marketplace. And when I talk to them about what to measure, I say, here's some other measurements you can have in your career. If you're introducing an initiative during each month, quarter time period, measure how many people, how many meetings you're having, and how many people show up to those meetings. Escalate that, because if you can go back and tell your boss, hey, we had 2 meetings this month, 10 people showed up. But the following month, we had 5 meetings and 50 people showed up. Those internal metrics give the leadership visibility into the momentum within the organization that helps you both politically, diplomatically, but it also rallies the momentum for budget and resources.
Ladies and gentlemen, amazingly, it is 57 minutes into our hour. I'm never quite sure how these conversations disappear so remarkably quickly. And respecting everyone that is listening and watching this, I will wind up our unfiltered conversation together. I'm going to ask you all to think about 1 or 2 words of guidance that you would give to anyone listening to this going forward. You know, what's sort of your rallying cry to all customer experience professionals as we experience customer experience day to day. But before I ask you to do that, everyone that has been listening to this, thank you so much for taking your valuable time today to participate in this conversation. I urge you, if you are not connected to these brilliant professionals already, to make sure that you connect with them, reach out to them, and continue to interact with them, because there are so many questions I'm sure you have on your mind. Ask them. They will have no problem, I'm sure, in responding to any questions you might have if you reach out to them on LinkedIn or anything else. So with that being said, rallying cry. Who wants to go first?
Be brave and be bold.
Be brave and bold. Thank you, Diane Majors. Eytan?
I would say accountability, implement accountability in the organization.
Implement accountability. Brilliant. Dennis?
Copycats finish last in the human race.
Ah, love it. Excellent. Copycats finish last in the human race. And last but not least, Olga.
Think business.
Think business. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to give my rallying cry, and my rallying cry is don't forget your funny bone. Business has become far too serious. We need to bring a little bit of fun and enjoyment back into what we do every day. Olga, Dennis, Diane, Eytan, thank you so much for participating in the conversation. We could have carried on for another 4 hours, I know, but I've hugely enjoyed it. I hope everyone else listening has. Same time next year?
Sure.
Okay. It's
Thank you, Ian. Thank you for
Thank
hosting.
you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Happy CX Day.